I'd like to start this video with a vocabulary test, dear viewer, and I'm sorry if you come to my channel for escapism or so you don't have to think about things like pop quizzes, but just go with me on this, okay? The test is one single word, and the word is flop. Now, what do you think the word flop means in the context of a product or of revenue and stuff, and businessy stuff? What is a flop? I'll give you a few seconds. No, I won't. According to the dictionary, a flop is a total failure. So like a show that nobody watches, or a movie that doesn't make back its budget, or perhaps one of the biggest RPG video game launches of all time. That's a flop as well, right?
No.
As has been well documented this year by yours truly, the amount of blind hatred there's been towards Starfield from the PlayStation base has been unmatched. And while fan reception to Starfield has obviously been more on the mixed side of things as time goes on, there's no denying that it was one of the biggest games of the year. But that blind hatred from a very loud chunk of the internet has somehow managed to convince people that the game was a complete and utter failure, basically just because they decided it was. So the other day, this tweet started making the rounds on gaming Twitter, and while the majority of people laughed their way right by it, a number of others took it rather depressingly seriously. PC Focus tweeted out a mock flop of the year poll from the Game Awards, it's a nice little Photoshop job there, with the 6 games being Redfall, Hyenas, Forspoken, Lord of the Rings Gollum, Starfield, and Modern Warfare 3. Now, let's just go over a few things before diving into the people who unironically engaged with this post and tried to genuinely tell the internet that Starfield deserves to be called the flop of 2023. While the critical and player reception to Starfield has probably been more mixed than Microsoft and Bethesda were hoping for, there is no denying that it was a financial success. We're talking about a game that was in the top 5 of Steam's top seller charts for like 2 months leading up to launch. And once it came out, it remained in the top seller charts for like another month. And even as we speak, it's still in the top 40, which considering how massive of a platform Steam is, that's really impressive. Also, Starfield was topping the Xbox sales charts as well during its launch window, and the physical collector's editions were selling out almost immediately upon going on sale, and according to data published by Circana in mid-October, Starfield was the #1 best-selling game in the United States in September, and the 7th best-selling game in the United States of the entire year. Regardless of how you feel about Starfield as a game, there is no denying that it was absolutely not a flop. Objectively, factually, it was not. And just in case some of you don't believe the sales were as good as some believe them to be, let's take a look at this original post again. Can you honestly tell me that Starfield was a flop on the level of Redfall, which Phil Spencer literally had to apologize for? Or Forspoken, which was such a massive flop that it closed down the studio that made it? Or Lord of the Rings Gollum, which also forced its developer to step down from making anything ever again? And Hyenas, which, in case you're like me and had never even heard of this game, apparently it was a PvPvE sci-fi shooter that was canceled in September because Sega didn't even think it would turn a profit. So it's a game that didn't even come out because the publisher didn't think it would make any money. And there's also 2 games up here that shuttered their developers because they didn't make any money. And Starfield, one of the best-selling games of the entire year, is sharing the poll with them. This post is either bait or a potentially lethal dose of copium. And also, just in case you're still buying into this delusion that poor reception but high profit still means something flopped, by that logic, every single EA Sports game is also a flop. Which obviously isn't fucking true because they keep making the fucking things. But whether or not you think this initial post is just engagement bait or an actual piece of industry commentary that's just too deep for you to understand, man, it resulted in quite a few people engaging with it and offering up their arguments as to why they think Starfield not only deserves to be in the running for Flop of the Year, but also deserves the title of Flop of the Year. And because my name is Joe from Seattle, I was taking screenshots because the people who are this scared of Starfield and this hateful of Xbox are just fascinating to me. It's one thing to be like, I dislike Xbox and their first-party games because of XYZ actual reasons. It's another thing entirely to do what these people do, which I can only describe as whinging. And the reason for their whinging is essentially just a game came out and did well and didn't put any money in Sony's pockets. So put on your gas masks, tell your parents you love them, and let's continue the Starfield Salt saga together. Also, use code JOE for 10% off a new mousepad from 4D Gaming. I'm going to keep plugging this code until every single one of you gets a 4D Gaming mousepad because they're genuinely really good. At F1X Bayonet says, well, Starfield is a flop by all accounts, at least the unbiased ones. It was supposed to be Xbox year, but they could only pump out massive disappointments like Redfall and Starfield. Well, I'm not sure how you get more unbiased than the literal sales charts, but do you know what the word unbiased means? Because you followed the word unbiased with the phrase massive disappointment, which is literally biased language. Never mind the fact that we're talking about whether or not the game flopped. Remember, all the posts that I'm going to show you in this video are in response to this tweet. So you genuinely think that Starfield flopped in the same way as all these other games, and your reasoning is just something unbiased accounts. You know, fun fact, if you only listen to the accounts that say what you want to hear, that's actually the opposite of being unbiased. At I Hate English says Starfield don't sell nothing in PlayStation certainly is a flop. Name checks out. But yes, as all of you know, every game that doesn't release on PlayStation flops. Which is why League of Legends, Counter-Strike, Valorant, Clash of Clans, Team Fortress 2, Dota 2, Valheim, Half-Life Alyx, Warcraft, Starcraft, Roblox, Halo, Gears of War, Lost Ark, Ori, Forza, every simulator game, and every Nintendo game are all flops. Every single one of those games flopped because they weren't on PlayStation. Didn't you know that? At YabExe says the admin doesn't know what a flop is, Lamau. To which KDV responds, players, not sales. Sales have been pathetic. Nobody wants to own the game. I don't get this. Like, how in denial can you be about something? Starfield was the top of Xbox and Steam sales charts for literal months. And like I said before, official data has come out. Like, it's been confirmed. It was the best-selling game of September in the US and is one of the best-selling games of the entire year in the US. But I mean, you still have fucking Craig as your profile picture, as if that meme isn't literally over 3 years old at this point. It might be time for new memes. At Sunderwire says it absolutely is a flop. It's a bad game. I consider that a flop. Unlike all these other games that were just fucking peachy. Like even if we were to agree that all of these games are shit and no one liked any of them, Starfield is an obvious outlier here, you know? Like even if you want to make the stupid "it was bad, therefore it flopped" argument, are you still going to look at this list of games and pick out Starfield as the one that embodies your definition of flop the most? Like, seriously? At Game Master Yato says Fanboys wanted Starfield to be a flop so bad, lol. To which PlayStation MR responds, but it is a flop. Everyone hates it. Yes, everyone hates Starfield. Everyone hates it. Which is why in mid-November, this offline single-player game is still hosting tens of thousands of people on Steam at any given time, and is also still in the Xbox top 10 most played. Again, as an offline single-player game. I've said before that using concurrent player counts to judge the success of a non-multiplayer game is usually kind of dumb, because obviously when a game doesn't exist off shared servers or communities, it's not going to generate as high as of concurrent players. And obviously the success of a single-player game is more about how many copies are sold, as opposed to how many people continue to play it, because a single-player game, generally speaking, has an ending, you know? And yet, despite that, Starfield continues to crank better concurrent player counts than most live service games. But tell me more about how it was a flop and everyone hates it, you fucking walking dunce cap. Observer23 says, Starfield is dog shit if you are Bugthesda drone and listen to Todd lies, you take any shit thrown at you. And your profile picture is the fucking all-seeing eye. You know, it's possible, it's entirely possible that you're taking this app way too seriously. Platinum Collector says, nobody is really paying outright for the game. They're just using Game Pass. Its actual sales aren't anywhere near successful. Best-selling game of September, by the way. Steam top 10 for literal months, by the way. US top 10 for the entire year, by the way. Firebreather 451 says, Forspoken is definitely not a flop. Didn't sell, perhaps, but it's a good game. Bro, the studio literally closed down. Like, it's a tad late to come to Forspoken's defense, you know? Like, the support probably would have been appreciated earlier this year, but, you know, Odd AIs says, got to be Starfield, Xbots expected 96 meta game of the generation, and instead they got a buggy mess with a shit ton of loading screens that doesn't even do space travel right. And I mean, valid if the game isn't for you, and obviously bugs are always valid to criticize, but like, how does this make the game a flop? Like, literally, any of the things you said, how do those make the game a flop? Well, I mean, I'm sure you'll justify your reasoning in the replies to this, right? Because Whiskey replies, Starfield worse than Redfall? You're genuinely fishing for attention here. And then they respond, get off my timeline, Lamau. All right, never fucking mind, moving on. Mr. J Money Deuce says, Starfield into the now current gen with locked 30 FPS, no question. And your profile picture is from Final Fantasy XVI, the game that struggled to maintain 30 FPS and also sold way less than Starfield, the game that you're positive was a flop. Are you guys okay? Like genuinely, are you guys okay? The only explanation that I can think of for this kind of universal delusion is like Phil Spencer being your stepdad. Or Todd Howard being the mean PE teacher that thought you ran too slow. Like, it amazes me that people are still this fucking dedicated to calling Xbox shit and terrible and floppy, and yet completely unaware of the fact that you're basically just doing Microsoft's advertising for free. You're ensuring that no one ever forgets about Starfield. You're ensuring that no one ever pays attention to the dumb shit Xbox fanboys say, because the shit you say is always way dumber. But perhaps the worst part of all this is you're also ensuring that Sony continues to not take risks with their first-party games, and continues to tread water and refuse to innovate, all because you're completely dedicated to defending everything they do and shitting on Xbox for everything they do. Even if Xbox is way more interested in providing variety with their first-party games, and putting money towards stuff that isn't a cinematic third-person action game or a live service that may or may not ever see the light of day. But you guys just keep standing between Sony and criticism of any kind. That'll surely be the best thing for everyone in the gaming industry going forward. That certainly won't just encourage Sony's holding pattern now, will it? Toodles.